Hello again, everybody. Let's jump into another task here with, of course, again, another topic. You are going to another country to study. You would like to do a part-time job while you are studying. So you want to ask a friend who lives there for some help. Write a letter to this friend, and in your letter, give details of your study plans. Explain why you want to get a part-time job, and suggest how your friend could help you find a job. So a few different elements to this task, and we'll begin as always by trying to identify those key elements by underlining some keywords. So you are going to another country to study. That's quite important. And of course to study, we're not going to work, although that may be necessary. In fact, it is necessary. As we can see here, we need to do a part-time job. Notice it's part-time while you are studying. So you want to ask a friend. So again, we know it's an informal letter already because of the category, but the friend also indicates this. You want to ask a friend who lives there, also quite important, for some help. So we're just asking for help. And what do we need to do specifically? We need to give details of our plans, our study plans. So some information really about the course that we're taking and what our plan is. Why do we want a part-time job? So why is it important that we get a part-time job? There are a couple of ideas that you could be thinking about already. And suggest how your friend could help you find this job. So how your friend could help you find a job. Let's just put all that together, quite self-explanatory. Okay, so those are the key elements. I think that's everything. And so let's move over into the plan. We know that we're dealing with an informal letter, but very important that you write that down for yourself. And as I've said before, we should think about the general purpose, partly because that helps us to stick to a very clear purpose throughout. That's a very important element of achieving at least a band 7. So the purpose here seems to just be a request for help, really. So a request, in brackets we could write help. Sometimes we request other things other than help, but certainly here it's definitely a request letter and requesting some help. Let's think about the plan for the body paragraphs themselves, or the paragraphs. So we got paragraph 2, paragraph 3, and paragraph 4. Hopefully you've already been thinking potentially about some ideas that you could include here. So remember, paragraph 1 will just be either a purpose sentence or a hope you're well kind of sentence. And then in paragraph 2, we either immediately introduce the purpose if we didn't before, or we focus on the or focus on the first bullet point directive, which is to give details of your study plans. So first of all, let's talk about those study plans. What can we say? We want to say where we're going. Let's imagine we live in a different country other than the UK. I'm in the UK now, but I'm going to imagine I'm in a different country. So coming to the UK, maybe a specific city, let's say something like Exeter. So Exeter, when is it happening? Maybe in 2 months. So 2 months. Again, try to abbreviate when possible. Save time however you can. And what are we doing there? Maybe we're doing an MA. We're doing a master's course. So yeah, we'll develop that into a paragraph. But that should be enough ideas there. That's we are giving details. Explain why you want to get a part-time job. A good opportunity here is particularly a good way of demonstrating your range of grammar is to talk about how something was in the past and maybe something has changed, which is causing a different situation in the present, and that's why we need a job. Possibly there was something happened, some sort of emergency, a financial emergency, let's say. And that really changed our plans, and so now we need to work part-time. Don't really need to write work part-time, it's already up there, but there we go. Okay, so the final paragraph, we're suggesting how the friend can help us find a job. There's a few different things you could talk about here. Maybe you could talk about your friend could hand out CVs for you. You could go around to different shops or restaurants to hand in your resume. The other alternative is maybe because the friend lives in the country, maybe as a native speaker, he could or she could proofread. Let's say I'm going to go with this idea: proofread the CV. And the other thing that's important as well is a covering letter too. Covering letter is the letter that you add to your resume just to say that you want to work for this particular company and why you should be employed, rather than just a list of your work history, your attributes, your skills, etc. Okay, so we'll turn each of those points into paragraphs. Could be a little bit trickier than before, as it seems a little bit slim on detail, but yeah, we'll try and build something up here. So let's come over to the letter itself. As always, we're starting with a dear. We've just got the one friend here, so let's say dear Tony. So dear Tony, this time I'm going to begin with the simple how are you doing kind of opening. Let's go with I hope you and the family are well. Notice again this definite article appearing here. We know which family is being discussed. It's Tony's family. I could say hope you and your family are well, but as I've spoken about before, it's fine, but it's not so chatty. It's not quite so natural. It is okay if you write I hope you and your family are well. There isn't a problem there, but you're just demonstrating another layer of your command, a higher level, a deeper level, if you add a definite article in a location like this. Okay, so I hope you and the family are well. That's all I'm going to write there. Now remember, if we don't talk about the purpose in that first line, we must make sure we introduce the purpose immediately in the the first part of the second paragraph. So I'm going to start with our good informal friend Just. So just writing to you, just more informal, nice and colloquial, just getting in touch. Just getting in touch to, now it's a request letter. Request, a little bit formal, a little bit stuffy. I wouldn't put it in an informal letter. So let's just go with a simpler ask. We're asking for help. To ask for help, we could say that, or we could show off a bit more. Let's say to ask for a favor. Just getting in touch to ask for a favor. Let's improve this a little bit by showing our ability with informal language, nice natural chatty language, by adding something like this. To ask for a bit of a favor. A bit of a favor. It's like saying a small favor. So a bit of a favor, a small favor. So let's first of all give details of the study plans here. We've introduced the fact that we're writing because we need something, but let's smooth into the details of the study plans. And let's imagine that this person already knows a little bit about what we are doing. So we'll say as you know. So they know something already. We can imagine that we're inventing these details a bit. So what have we got here? Exeter. I'm moving to Exeter. We can say moving, even though it will be temporary, as long as it's over an extended period, like a year, which would be typical for studying, then moving is okay. I'm moving to Exeter. What have I got there? 2 months? In 2 months? What is a more informal way of saying two? In a couple of months. In a couple of months, why? We've got it right there, to begin my master's program. This word masters, it's a little bit confusing. A lot of people write it in different ways. The typical way that we write it in England is we have the capital M there and we have this apostrophe between the R and the S. But I have seen it written in other ways as well, where you drop the apostrophe, for example. You could also just write MA program if you're worried. As it's an informal letter, it's okay. So to begin my master's program. Okay, now, here's a problem because I'm a little bit stuck. I've finished all of my points here. Sometimes this will happen. You haven't written down enough and you've completed your paragraph. That looks too small to me. I think we're going to need to add a bit more. Okay, so now let's have a look at paragraph 3. We talked about a financial emergency. Maybe what we could do here is we could find a way to set up a transition so that we transition neatly into financial emergency. That's what we can do with the remainder of this paragraph. So we can talk about how things were going well, so that in the next paragraph we can say they're not going well anymore. So let's say something like this. I want you to notice here the tense that I'm using. Yeah. Okay, so this is the sentence I've written. What tense am I using here? I'm using the past continuous. And why do you think I'm using the past continuous? Well, we use the past continuous when we talk about something that happened in the past which leads to another event. So we often follow the past continuous with the preposition until. Something happened until something else happened to get in the way. Something interrupted it. I'll give you a few examples just to clarify this. I was cooking dinner until I heard the phone ring. Or I was cooking dinner and then the phone rang. So past continuous until past simple. And the same thing is going on here. That's why the transition works very well. We're setting ourselves up with the past continuous. This suggests to the reader that it was no longer the case that things were continued to go smoothly. So the reader is prepared, and it's a very coherent switch, nice and cohesive. So in paragraph 3, we talk about what went wrong. Why is it no longer going smoothly? That's why we use that past continuous. So it's not just a range of grammar, but it's appropriate grammar. It really helps the letter to flow. So everything was going smoothly. I was looking forward to settling in, getting started. Notice these phrasal verbs here, like settling in and getting started in October. Unfortunately, so we're setting ourselves up here. The reader already expects this to come about, so there's a nice sense of cohesion. Unfortunately, there's been an emergency. Let's pause a minute. Let's add a little bit more information or a little bit more vocabulary. This is a nice bit of natural vocabulary. Somewhat of a problem. Okay, this somewhat of it's like there's a sort of a problem. We don't want to overemphasize the problem. We, particularly when we're British, we try to downplay problems. We try to make them seem not as bad as they probably really are. So we can add that there. We could also change the word problem for something more advanced. Snag. So a snag, typically we can use it as a verb. You would, if you caught your sweater or your jumper on the door, maybe a thread from your jumper was hanging out and it got caught in the door, we would say that you snagged your jumper. And we can use the same expression as a noun just to talk about a problem, or hopefully a temporary problem, a bit of something that's got in the way essentially of our plans. So there's been somewhat of a snag, and notice the punctuation that I'm using here as well, this ellipsis, which is 3 full stops just to give a sense of a pause, some sort of like tension, some drama, and that kind of works here because we're setting up, we're leaving the reader pausing, wondering what's happened, what's the problem, and then we can carry on and use this vocabulary we've got in the plan. A financial emergency, a bit of detail here, let's say at home, means that we don't even need the that really. Again, that is one of those words you can omit. Let's save a bit of time. It means I now can't really afford both the program, the master's program, and how much it costs to live in the UK, which we call the COL, cost of living in the UK. As we all know, it's quite expensive to live in the UK. So now I can't really afford both the program and the cost of living in the UK. Notice what's happened here. So we've gone from past continuous to present perfect. You could also use the past simple here. There was somewhat of a snag is also okay. This present perfect just means that the problem is still a problem in the present and it was a problem in the past, but you could use either. And then we move over to the present simple. This financial emergency, right now, this is the result. This is what it equates to. This is what it means. So I can't afford the program and the cost of living. So what do we need to do? As we see from the plan, we need to work part-time. So it looks like, and notice here, moving to the future, I will have to take IEL contraction, a part-time job, to, now what is a nice idiom we can use here to mean to have enough money to survive, to get by, to make ends, hopefully you're shouting meet at the screen, you'd be correct. So to make ends meet, to get enough money just to get by, to survive, to make ends meet. Okay, idiomatic vocabulary is always okay in the informal letters. You need to be careful with it with task 2 in the essays and in other places, but particularly with task 1 in the letters. If it's an informal letter, then you can almost get away with any idiom. Just make sure it's an appropriate idiom. So the final paragraph here, we are suggesting how the friend could help us find a job. We've got proofread, we've got CV. Let's begin by just repeating the purpose, just to draw their mind back to it. We've already said we're getting in touch to ask for a bit of a favour, but we will use some of the vocabulary that we looked at in the theory course to help us out here. So this is always very nice when we're asking for we're making a request in an informal letter. You couldn't do me a huge favour, and then the question tag at the end. If you know what a question tag is, where we take that modal verb and the subject and we just invert them at the end to create a question tag. So you couldn't, could you? And remember, if it's a negative modal, couldn't, we turn it into a positive modal at the end, could you, and vice versa. So I could say, you can call her this evening, can't you? Just notice that it's you can and can't, and the other way around, you can't, can you? Okay, so very useful in informal letters because it's very conversational, and that's what we're aiming for when we write an informal letter. So you couldn't do me a huge favor, could you? I'm going to add a little bit more language here. To help me here. Now this is like a form of referencing. That's why it's quite useful. We're adding to that coherence and cohesion. The word here doesn't refer to a location. It really means in this situation. So the situation that I've just talked about above, that's what I mean by here. So you couldn't do me a huge favor to help me in this particular problem, but nice and informal and casual and natural and conversational here, to help me here, could you? And we carry on. Now notice as well, you've got that question mark. Always important to have the right punctuation. We're going to carry on this theme of asking for something. We try and not be too imposing on the other person. We want to keep drawing back. I hope I'm not asking for too much. So we're being very polite, but in an informal way. We don't want to demand things of people unless the letter requires it. We just want to ask and be polite. So I hope I'm not asking for too much, but I'd really appreciate it if. So it's another sentence segment that you could use in many informal request letters. I hope I'm not asking for too much, but I'd really appreciate it if what. And we've got the notes down in the plan there. If you could. Notice here, I would appreciate it if you could. Would and could, not will and can, because will and can sounds too demanding. But would and could, more polite, we're saying that it would be great. If you can't do it, it's okay, but it would be great. Okay, so we use would and could when we want to be more polite. So if you could proofread my CV, and let's say, and the template for my covering letter, because a covering letter should be different for each company, but they'll typically be the same in most details. That's why we call it a template, and then we fill in the template with the company name, maybe switch a few details around. And the covering, the template for my covering letter, I've attached them to the letter, as in the letter that we're sending to this person here. Okay, let's just finish up with a final line just to say goodbye. And again, when you're making a request, it's very important that you say thank you. So let's do that here in a nice informal way. Thanks a bunch for this. Thanks a bunch. You never write this in a formal letter or even a semi-formal letter. Very important. A bunch, very informal. So just to close friends or to friends. Thanks a bunch for this. Can't wait to catch up. Notice the phrasal verb, in person. When I touch down, again another phrasal verb, not arrive, but touch down in Exeter. So now we know that the friend actually lives in Exeter as well. So when I touch down in Exeter. But yes, these phrasal verbs are very important in informal letters. We'll close it up with, what do you reckon? We could do with the best or warm wishes. Sounds a little bit corny to me. I'm just going to go with all the best. And we'll finish it with Al, short for Alistair or Albert or whatever it might be. But again, these short nickname forms are always very good when we're writing to friends. So keep that in mind as well. So hopefully that was a useful letter template for you for a request letter asking for help in an informal tone. As always, have a look at the gap fill exercise next, and I will then see you in the following lecture.